And Tēnā koutou katoa. How am I? Welcome everyone to a GeoEye seminar that's not on a Thursday. And we really took the opportunity to have this seminar because I got an email that Joe from Planet is visiting New Zealand and doing a bit of a tour. We thought it's a too good opportunity to miss, and to get somebody really senior in a leading remote sensing company come and talk to us about all the great work they're doing with satellite imagery. And we've had a really good conversation over the last few hours about research going on at UC using Planet imagery. What I won't take too much time up introducing you, you can talk about your background and things like that. We also have Tristan here as well. He's the country manager for New Zealand, as well as that small Australia over there, Pacific Islands as well. Yeah, but New Zealand in particular. Although you're based in Melbourne, right? Sydney. Thanks for coming along. And I nearly forgot to say, but at 3 p.m. until 4, these guys are around until 4 p.m. So for those of you who are able to stay on, we've just allocated that time for discussion, questions, and things like that, and further engagement with the Planet team. So yeah, welcome, Joe. Let's see if we can work this. Should be no problem. Should be. Can we do technology? I'm sure. Yeah, we are there, I think. To go and just. There we go. I think it's gonna. All right, you're on mute, right? Yes, good. See you talking that one.
I am. It's moving a bit slow, but we'll make it work. Well, thank you. We are delighted to be here. The team has been very welcoming, and so thank you for hosting us. I wanted to start someplace very far away, both in space and time. This is a place called Ashfall in Nebraska in the US. And what you're looking at is the fossil of a North American rhinoceros. These animals all died in the sort of late Miocene, about 11 or 12 million years ago. And so I sort of think, they lost their battle with climate change. It was much more acute. They suffered from a supervolcano eruption. And as they were congregating around this watering hole, kind of desperate to get some last water or oxygen, more than 150 skeletons have shown up here. It's, I think, a reminder not about the doom associated with climate change, but about something that makes us different from the animals that inhabit this planet, which I think is our collaborative power to solve problems together. I am a tropical forest ecologist. I have to put this slide in here next to a giant fig tree in southern Peru just to prove to you that I did spend quite the dutiful years roaming the jungle and getting mud all over my boots. And I learned a lot about forest structure in the field before I ever became a remote sensing scientist. In fact, I don't think that I really paid much attention to remote sensing at all through the end of my PhD. I got a postdoc that was in a lab focused on remote sensing, where my job was to do the field work. And actually, this was one of the first weeks of that position. I was meant to measure trees, fortunately not this one, on their diameter, because this is rather difficult. But I got into remote sensing, and it changed my perspective of ecosystems themselves. And this is one of the first images that I saw when I arrived at Planet in 2014, which I'll talk more about. This is, anyone know where this is? Michelle's ruled out here because we talked about it this morning. This is an island in the middle of the Panama Canal in Panama. It's called Barro Colorado Island. It was created, the island, in 1914 when the canal opened. The water around it is Lake Gatun, which was created by the largest earthen dam on Earth. I think it still is, actually. They basically dammed this river and they created a kind of water bridge. So the ships come in, they go up the locks, they ride across the water and come out the other side. But the yellow dots are guaiaconis trees flowering. This is a true color image from a Planet CubeSat. I haven't done anything to it. So just with Planet satellites, we're at the resolution where if the conditions are right, we can pick up the individual tree crown in the top of the canopy. And this is kind of revolutionary because we can peer into the behavior of large trees and other organisms on the Earth in a way that's really unprecedented. It combines the very, very high frequency of MODIS, but with a sharp pixel that is about 10 times sharper than Sentinel on a pixel per pixel basis. So I want to take you through a survey of all kinds of planet results, but I have to tell you, this work that you're going to see is the work of others. It's groups like you at various universities around the world. I'm going to try to be as informal as possible because if I'm going in a direction that's totally boring you guys, or if there's anything else I can do, just please throw up your hand, ask a question. I can repeat the question for the Zoom so we can stay on track, but don't let me go down a monotone path, okay? So I like to think about, let's take a global problem like hydrological management or water security. At the beginning of solving that problem, there's collection of data, there's observation of the world, there's understanding of ecosystems in local communities. I simplify this all down to measurement as stage 0. And we are in a measurement revolution right now. Of course, we have the threat of climate change. I don't think it's going to destroy us the way it destroyed those North American rhinoceros, but suffice it to say, it is a great threat. We also have a threat around biodiversity. I'm putting the Keeling curve up here just to show you the kind of track that we're on with carbon dioxide. But the thing on the right is the deployment of Earth observation spacecraft specifically. It doesn't include Starlink communication satellites. It's just Earth observation satellites. And so you can see that skyrocketing number of spacecraft. This is partly Planet, but many other companies and also governments are increasing their satellite deployments. So when it comes to just the sheer measurement of the state of the Earth, we are in a radically accelerating state where we're getting more and more measurements of the whole Earth. In fact, and this might be one of those slides that's a little tricky for me to, I'm tethering on my phone right now because you see visitor credentials required a New Zealand phone number. And although I want to move here, I don't have one yet. Yeah, so this will be a little bit glitchy, but we have so many satellites in space, we can watch ourselves launch additional satellites into space. This is a high resolution video of the Artemis moon rocket in late August last year. It didn't actually launch on that particular attempt, launched a couple of months later, but quite remarkable to just see it sitting there as the satellite slews over top. Our mission at Planet is to image the whole Earth, making change visible, accessible, and actionable. All of those things are hard. And this morning, I think a lot of what we were talking about was accessibility and actionable, right? And so I'm really eager, and Tristan and I are really eager to hear from all of you throughout this talk and later today about what kinds of things we can do to make that easier. We're operating over 200 satellites. Most of them, they would fit right on this table. They're about the size of a loaf of bread. It's a 3U CubeSat. There's a telescope, a camera, some solar panels, avionics, communication antennas, including that one sticking forward there is a radio antenna, and there's a downlink. We're pushing the data to Earth. It goes basically, the moment it comes to Earth, it goes into the internet and it goes through a series of automated processing. We additionally have these 20 now, not 21. We lost one to a solar storm, sadly. SkySats, and they are a little bit bigger. They're about the size of a dishwasher or a small bookcase. The ones on the left, the CubeSat, they image the Earth at 3.7 meters per pixel. Like I said, it's about 10 of those before you get a Sentinel pixel. And the SkySats image at around 50 centimeters per pixel when they're pointed straight at the ground. So it's a very high resolution constellation. When these things are all orbiting together, let's see if we get this one. This is the last video, so we don't have to worry about this too much. You have the rotating Earth. Like Landsat and Sentinel, the doves are orbiting in sun-synchronous orbits, a combination of them, but largely all the same orbit. And then like driving a Zamboni or mowing your lawn, we're collecting strip after strip after strip of data. And ideally, those strips should be flush at the equator. And this allows us to image nearly the entire land surface of the planet and 100 kilometers out to sea every single day. So for a fixed point on the Earth's surface, on average, we have about 2,000, more than 2,000 images for that location going back to the beginning of 2017 when we first deployed this constellation. The SkySats are in a series of different orbits, but it kind of, you sort of want to worry about that less because they behave differently. That we point them and collect images at a fixed position. With the SkySat constellation, rather than an image every day, we can image one fixed point some 15 times per day. It varies a little bit by latitude and where the point is. Okay, but this is not all planet. That is a lot of satellites, but there are many thousands more. This is a survey of where NASA is right now with its Earth observation fleet, including the A-Train and numerous other constellations. NASA, I was just at the Landsat science team meeting in February earlier this year, where they're talking about Landsat Next, which will be a 3-satellite constellation. The Europeans are working on Sentinel-2 next generation. Here's a survey of the ESA missions. Just for my own bearings too, how many people in the room are using either a NASA mission or an ESA mission in some way in their classroom or in their workflow here at the university? Awesome. That's spacecraft, right? But we have all kinds of other sensors, drones. This one is an eddy covariance sensor, so it's a sonic anemometer, sorry, jet lag kicking in, which is connected then to an infrared gas analyzer. We can, with these types of sensors, measure the flux of gases as they're leaving an ecosystem. So just enormous diversity of these measurement tools and observations. And I know this might seem a little bit outside, but we're not just looking at the Earth, right? We look all over our universe. Ironically, this is from the European Space Agency Gaia mission. Who in the room knows Gaia from James Lovelock? Yeah, definitely might be a little bit of an age marker there. When I started at Planet, I had hair, by the way, so I know the feeling. Lovelock wrote in the 1950s that the Earth is perhaps a single organism or a superorganism that, like the systems in your body, is self-regulating. And he focused a lot on homeostasis, how Earth's ecosystems kind of keep each other in check or in balance. There are many scientific critiques of the Gaia hypothesis. I think a lot of those critiques are quite strong. And I think, well, we don't have to debate Lovelock's merits right now, especially in his absence. He passed away not too long ago. But I think it is notable that he was certainly right about the possibility of Gaia. And what I see with this increasing proliferation of sensors and the common multilateral effort that we're making to increase the conservation and protection of our ecosystems, you could make the case that we are, in fact, constructing Gaia, that over time, we will be one of the ingredients in that homeostasis of managing the planet's ecosystems. This is really quite exciting. Okay, I want to dive now through a tour of what people are doing with some of these measurements in the context of planet data. And this is the part where I'm most at risk of just droning on. So please holler my name if I've lost you. Okay, we have this battery of measurements. This picture almost looks like a mirror image in this room. This is St. Louis University, but it's a lab like yours. And there's a whole group of geospatial people in there. My favorite part of science is kind of this part where you're interrogating a hypothesis, a question. Can I measure this or that property of the Earth? Can I find this seal population? Can I measure the water content of the soil? And these questions are really important because they help us both figure out what's available in the suite of measurements at stage 0, but they also help us figure out how we could maybe change the measurements we're collecting if there's some data gap that we have. Planet's data users in the scientific world exist in this wide community. And what you're looking at here is actually, excuse me, people in the basic education and research program. I know many of you in the audience have some of these accounts. That's what you see at the country level data. And then all the dots are partners that are under contract with Planet at different levels, but something like an ESRI license that allows higher volumes of data to flow into scientific institutions. And I want to show you some of the results. In all of these cases, they are produced by external people. They are led by external scientists. There are over 2,500 scientific articles being published, have been published, sorry, with Planet data right now at a rate of about 2 per day. So I can no longer read them all. I'd love to, but so I'm going to miss things. And actually, I'm going to present a little bit of work in New Zealand, and the highest risk part of my job is the prospect of presenting somebody's work to them while they're in the audience. So if I talk about one of your papers, please interrupt me and take over, and that would be great. So I showed those flowering trees in Panama. Here's, you know, just in terms of studying tropical forests, that would be enough for me. Like, the science of studying tropical forests is riveting. But there are many applications of this data for forest management and ecosystem management. Here are 3 other examples that specifically identify these phenological events at the individual tree crown level. The one on the bottom right is from Southwest Australia. It's a group that identified a particular species of eucalyptus that was an important conservation priority using these methods. The one in the center is a Belgian university that is working very closely with a forest management government agency, essentially, on a kind of national forest where they have some disease outbreaks. And they were able to separate using phenological changes like autumn colors and flushing times, the individual tree crowns of spruces versus oaks versus beeches. And they can only do it at the genus level, but really promising. And the one on the left, in terms of kind of a commercial agricultural context, this is from UC Davis. They're identifying flowering events on almond trees that allow people to increase the way they estimate yield. So the flower production of the almond trees is correlated with the almond output. And almonds are big, perhaps too big of a cash crop in California. They do consume an enormous amount of water. So cut back on your almonds if you want to help California ecosystems. Couple of groups looking at air quality. And this was interesting because the Planet satellites were not designed to look at the atmosphere. In fact, it's a land imaging mission. So this was just a ancillary or sort of spin-off outcome of the constellation. But a group at Duke, a group at a Swedish university, they took air quality sensor data from the ground, like that eddy covariance site I showed you, except it's more like it was more like a commercial air quality sensor that you would put on the top of your house or an office building. And they made a spatial model. They correlated the ground sensor data with Planet images. And then from that model generated predicted air quality over a time series for multiple cities in China. Another ecosystem we were not, well, we definitely thought about the water, but it wasn't our #1 priority. People have been able to use the Dove constellation, the CubeSats, to look at water turbidity. The one on the bottom left is a coral reef monitoring effort led by Arizona State University. But the one on the right is quite amazing. This is Venice Harbor. This is from an Italian university. There's 2 columns there in the figure on the right. The one on the left, the yellow, orange, red, is high sediment loads in the water typical of Venice Harbor. What happened in the column on the right, where it all turns blue, is the COVID lockdowns happened and the ship traffic stopped. And all of that sediment came right out of the water. These were, I think, really interesting applications of the Planet data, and the users had to do some innovative science because nobody had made water-related products with our data before, bottom reflectance or bathymetry detection, and each of these groups did all of those things. Some things a little bit more outside of science, even in the social sciences. That sounded funny. Let's say the social sciences. User groups looking at patterns of life. So the object of study here is not a population of animals or a population of trees or an ecosystem exactly, but how do humans move around the Earth and what kinds of spatial patterns can we see with that? Another COVID study, the one on the left from Ohio State. this was remarkable. A planet pixel, I said, is 3.7 meters on a side. That's about the size of a large truck, like an F-150. They detected, over a time series of planet data, the relative abundance of vehicles on public roads. This is quite edge science, right? It's like right at the limit of what the sensor can do. And you have to ask yourself, how is that even possible? What's happening is that there's a spectral difference. Oh, my computer wants to do a Zoom update. No, a Slack update, even worse. I don't want to use Slack right now. The abundance of vehicles will change the spectral fingerprint, if you will, of the road's surface, even if you cannot resolve the individual vehicles. And so that's what they detected. And it's hard to see on the insert, I know, but that declining blue line is the declining relative abundance of vehicles on public roads in New York. They also looked at Tokyo, Shanghai, some other places. The red line is COVID caseload, and they're invertedly correlated. I won't go through all the rest of these, but they're similar ideas. I do want to talk about the one in the middle. This is actually a very similar analysis that looked at street markets in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and was able to, again, identify, first of all, they did something a little bit different. They digitally tagged in high resolution data, like for instance, Digital Globe data in Google Earth or SkySat imagery, the presence of an open public market at a fixed position. Then they studied those market locations over a long time series. And they again detected a dramatic reduction in the market intensity traffic associated with the COVID lockdowns. Really remarkable. These deal with data fusion, and you probably see where I'm going here now, just to survey the whole diversity of things. I won't go through all of these, but with this massive increase in the number of these measurement tools, one of the big problems we have now that we didn't have in, say, 1975 in remote sensing, where we were trying to analyze a stack of Landsat 1 images. We had a different problem back then, which is you couldn't get your hands on them because it wasn't public data. But suffice it to say, if you say you do an analysis just on MODIS, you're only dealing with one sensor on board one spacecraft. That means the calibrations of the spacecraft or the sensor that might be noisy or error prone are happening on all the images you're analyzing. So they're, if you will, less of a problem for the analysis. Now we have the problem of making analysis ready data. If I want to make a time series of forest cover on New Zealand going all the way back to 1970, I have to look at 9 different Landsat sensors, or those plus 2 Sentinel spacecraft. And all of these spacecraft have different calibrations. And when you take this into the planet context, you are dealing with potentially hundreds of different imaging systems that in principle are calibrated to each other, but nevertheless have some noise in the data. So these authors are doing something really innovative, and it's taking the literature by storm, if such a thing can be exciting. It's definitely not as exciting as like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever, but they're taking sensors from public sensor data and planets' satellites, and they're spatially and temporally fusing pixels where they take the trade-offs of the different sensor packages and kind of solve for those trade-offs. So you get the high resolution in space and time benefit of the planet data, but also the diverse spectral observations that you get from Sentinel-2 or Landsat 9, and hopefully soon Landsat Next. So the image insert in the very center of that figure on the bottom, that's a 3-meter estimated shortwave infrared data layer that's created by the fusion of Sentinel-2 and planet imagery. All of this is early work, but for those of you that follow changes in whole scientific disciplines with interest, perhaps political interest, when I see something like this, I really take notice. All these labs are different. They have no co-authors in common. They're doing this kind of sensor fusion methodology because it's a step that they realized they needed to do in order to solve the problem that they happened to be working on, and all those problems were different. So they're, by gestalt, all of these methods are like identical, but they all use different widgets and have slightly different kind of parameters and stuff. This is a little bit just to look at why this works or how this works. If you think of the Earth's surface as, say, the bottom of this Jenga tower, and each layer, like we've been playing for a few hours with all these holes, is a layer of imagery or measurements over time. These fusion methods essentially use statistical inference to create a more rigorous and consistent time series. This is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of these, but at this point you get the point. There's lots and lots and lots of studies. There are more than 200 vegetation carbon analyses. This is a very popular and important approach right now, where people are taking field data, airborne LiDAR data, satellite data, fusing those things all together in space, using kind of things that are similar to that Jenga tower analogy. But what they're spitting out the other side is a map of estimated carbon. Okay, I wanted to look at a few that were not necessarily from New Zealand, but they relate to some ecological challenges currently in New Zealand, at least so far as I can be aware as a naive visitor. One of them is, where are the species? What is the biodiversity of a particular forest or particular wetland? To go all the way back to that flowering tree example, this is perhaps the most cutting edge work happening with planet data. There's 5 or so labs around the world leading it. I'm going to show you results from 2 of them. Excuse me. One of them is at the University of Hong Kong. And I love this because this visual in the center is really helpful. So imagine that you take one of those yellow flowering trees in your mind from the first slide, and you forget about everything else. You're just looking at that one crown. And you're just following the pixels from that particular crown over the calendar year. So you could think about a tree in your, perhaps near your home that you know, like you personally know that one tree, not that one species, right? And it's going to go through this phenological cycle. Even if it's an evergreen tropical tree, it will produce new leaves. It will have a flushing peak at different times of the year. So this sort of phenomenological slide, figure in the top center there, is showing exactly that. You're following a few pixels on a tree crown. In this case, it's a temperate tree in the northern hemisphere. So in day 0 of the year, January 1st, it's wintertime, and that tree's just a series of sticks with snow around it. But you go through the winter, there's this low, EVI is just enhanced vegetation index. It could be anything. It could be greenness, it could be NDVI. The tree is basically in a state of dormancy and it's static. And then all of a sudden, around day of year 100, which is going to be around April or so, it starts to leaf out. It turns green, it flushes, and very quickly its whole crown fills up with leaves. But remember, you've been following that one tree. And now it rides into the summer, and it will start to produce late season tissues. Like, first of all, those bright green, it's spring here right now, right? This color behind us, I mean, I saw some more obvious examples driving around this morning, but you know, you get this early season green that's it's almost pale, like neon, very bright, right? And we can see that difference. And then as you go into the late season, the tissues become the thicker, waxier, more weathered, and then they might turn darker green. And then they're going to go through an autumn cycle where they could turn yellow, red, any number of colors, and then drop. So that's what they're showing there. For a conifer, even, you will typically have a phenological cycle that is much less variation overall, but it is nevertheless there. And a lot of tropical trees are deciduous. 20%, give or take, of the tree species near Manaus in Brazil drop their leaves every year. And they might drop them in different styles, like there's a brevideciduous style and so forth. So what these authors did at this group at Hong Kong is apply this methodology to several neon monitoring sites. These are National Ecological Observatory Network, which is sort of a North American network. I think it's still just North American. But it's something like LTER, if you know that, the Long-Term Ecological Research Network. And they were able to show statistical power to discriminate among numerous temperate tree species. The power differed depending on latitude. This methodology is obviously like early work, but it is working. And so if I ask the question, could you map, say, the 10 most common tree species in New Zealand down to the individual tree crown level, where you could look at one tree crown in a satellite image and say, I have very high confidence that this particular crown is a Northophagus, like southern beech tree? This is a really interesting scientific question to me right now. Basically, same story here, but they have a visual that helps take a look at what these maps might actually look like. This is a different group at Aberystwyth University. No authors in common, but working in very similar ways and similar methodology. The map on the right, this is unpublished work, but having visited there, I thought it was compelling and powerful, is they're showing an ability to discriminate among 3 major genera of trees in Wales. This has immediate practical application in Wales because they have rural payments, subsidies for landholders to change the ecological configuration of their homes and fields and farms. For instance, if you plant wildfires, yeah, now I'm definitely talking too fast. If you don't plant wildfires, please. If you plant wildflowers, instead of, say, you reduce your sheep paddock in Wales by 10% and replace it with wildflowers, you get a significant tax benefit from the government. So this type of mapping can have immediate practical effect on these farmers. This one from Australia, sadly, I didn't know we didn't talk about those characters here, but nevertheless, I know it's a major issue in Australia, in New Zealand, and I thought this figure was just very useful. Continuous and rigorous shoreline mapping. So you can now take hold of understanding the geomorphology of the entire coastline with some 200 clear images per calendar year, maybe 150, depending on what part of the South Island you're on. And then potentially be able to see and position resources after a disaster with greater quickness or ease. One that I just added as we were sitting down, because we were talking about digital elevation models this morning, and I was being taught a really interesting story of the possibility of super resolution for DEMs, which was something I hadn't ever thought about. There's a group at Ohio State that is doing 3-dimensional change detection with the Planet CubeSat data. This is rather remarkable. For those of you that have done photogrammetry or DEM work, typically you want multiple images from different camera positions pointed at the same target, collected at the same time or nearly the same time. If you have an iPhone, I'm sure a Pixel can probably do it too. You can use, there's like a LiDAR in the iPhone 12 or 14, so you can actually do this in a room. I did it, it blew my mother's mind at the living room of the house. It was worth it. But Ron June, this professor at Ohio State, figured out that even though the doves, first of all, the dove satellites are nadir pointing. We do not deliberately point them in different directions. We just point them at the ground. There's enough stochasticity in the system that an individual dove image might have an off nadir angle of 2 degrees or 4 degrees or 5 degrees or -5 degrees. And so his lab was able to pull down a bunch of images together over a span of time. He calls this multi-view stereo, integrate all those images, produce a DEM. Now the DEM is not pristine. It's not going to be as good as what you would get if you used a sub-meter resolution satellite or a drone. But because this method was functional, he could do it for a calendar month and then another calendar month and then another calendar month. And that's how he got to 3-dimensional change detection. What he shows there is the planet imagery on the left, a LiDAR digital surface model that was collected with a drone by his own lab, and the associated digital surface model that was created from the planet imagery. So you can actually see that even though the vertical axes are pretty noisy there, the vertical results, that the change detection event is very brightly and clearly observable and almost perfectly correspondent to the visual imagery. This is really powerful. Another one I added, and I actually haven't read this paper in a couple of years, so I'm going to say only a couple of things about it, but I was embarrassed to realize after talking about the cryosphere for 45 minutes this morning that even though I love the cryosphere, I'd left out a lot of cryosphere related things. So I just did want to highlight that a lot of people are using planet data to understand glacial changes, calving events. This was perhaps the most interesting study so far because it was a large scale analysis of alpine glaciers from the University of Potsdam. And they were able to combine historical records with large scale planet observations and other satellite data to argue, or at least hypothesize, that some of these areas may be experiencing a migration in the origin point of these glacial lake outburst floods. Here now, I do have a few from New Zealand. This one is from the University of Auckland, Marie Ford, who's been working with us for a long time. This is an older kind of white paper that Marie put together, but it's still one of the coolest things I've ever seen with planet data. And I like a lot of these slides, it takes an elevator ride to explain. But if you look at the top left, that's an average of the true color of a stack of imagery over time. So you're looking at the harbor, you can see the coastline there, but you see these white shapes. What you're seeing is that on average, that pixel is in a state where the water is frothy or there's a breaking wave at that pixel. If you take this thought for a moment and compare it to the autumn color changes with the trees, it's exactly the same remote sensing principle. It's just that in this context, it's a pixel phenology. There's not really a true phenology event happening here where you have changes in the patterns of life, right? It's just that there's a seasonality to the way the surface of the Earth looks at this location. And then he's got a median filter, same thing. You can see the standard deviation, so that shows you how noisy it is, what the probability of a breaking wave is over time. And then there's an index that they've created. I think they use it with other sensors as well, called breaking wave fraction. But here's the coolest part. Between 2017 and 2018, looking at this whole time series of data for both calendar years, they can detect changes in the bathymetry of this harbor itself. Even though the satellite is not penetrating down to the ground at this location, it's much too deep. We can only see down to about 15 meters depth, even in pretty clear water. So this is kind of like a geomorphological sensing tool that was put together here. It was really interesting. There are many, many studies on this, and this is no longer particularly a cutting edge example, but I did want to point out that Planet Data has been used dozens of times to look at surface ruptures associated with earthquakes, including in the 2016 South Island earthquake. So using a method, something like optical flow or vector field analysis, what's happening here is the investigators are showing the divergence of the surface of the Earth that occurs between time 0 before the quake and time 1 after the quake. The potential benefits for Planet Data in this context are that that time window can be very short, quite short, in fact. There's another study on an earthquake in Ridgecrest, California in 2019, where they were able to do a surface deformation analysis within 24 hours after the earthquake, because the planet imagery after the quake had already been collected. And those 24 hours are important because they are the hours where you have the highest probability of saving lives. This is a paper that I found on the plane on the way here, so I haven't really had a chance to absorb it. This lead author, Clemente, is there any chance they're in the room, is from University of Canterbury. Does anyone know this author, this group? I was really hopeful because I have questions, but suffice it to say, it's a New Zealand-wide seagrass analysis and analyzed some 500 images at these 20 different sites. This is about to get to the next place I want to go, which is scale. Everything we've looked at until this point has been localized studies in small areas, big enough to write a paper or present at AGU or some other conference, but not necessarily at the scale at which it could potentially start to impact decisions, improve people's lives. So I want to talk about scale for a moment. Of all the scientific studies with Planet Data, if you think of them like a big histogram in terms of the size or the impactfulness that they've had, we're now starting to get out to the right tail. And I want to show you some real highlights of people that are working at really, really large scales, particularly because a lot of these examples, well, some of them are areas larger than New Zealand, but I think the Planet Data could support quite easily a large-scale, countrywide, nationwide analysis here. This is a group at Clark University that did this national analysis of agricultural systems in Ghana. For food security, purposes, it's very valuable in these parts of the world to understand field boundaries and property management, because you have a lot of small property owners, and you, with Planet Pixel specifically, you start to resolve even those fields that are, say, a half hectare or a quarter hectare in size. So they hand labeled hundreds of thousands of these fields, trained up a neural net, and they were able to generate this map, which at the time of publication was really the first very high resolution agricultural assessment of an entire country. And they did it in multiple time steps across the wet season and the dry season. This is another recent one and only a couple weeks old. And I've actually been on the phone with the lead author here because this is so exciting. This is from Martin Brandt's group at the University of Copenhagen. They have an approach that allows them to find individual isolated trees in planet data. Now, they cannot find all the trees in a clump of trees like a patch of forest yet. They're working on that. And they're looking into those phenological methods we talked about. They have a different approach where, like the way you would in a computer science class, find all the hot dogs on the internet or find all the cats on the internet, they're tagging the individual trees and training up a neural net to go find other similar looking trees. They hand labeled 230,000 trees in this India data set. Then they applied this algorithm to the entire country for 10 years of time series data. So it's nationwide, it's a decade long. They found 600 million trees that they essentially tagged digitally down to the, again, it's like not population of sugar maples, but like this individual sugar maple tree in your yard, 600 million trees. And it's a little bit hard to see, but the green dots are trees that were present the whole duration of the time series. The red dots are trees that were present at the beginning, but were lost somehow. We don't know necessarily how. And the yellow dots are trees that appeared during the census. And they found a dramatic reduction in these isolated trees in India over this 10-year period. This is quite important because in parts of the world that are arid or semi-arid or savanna, these isolated trees store an enormous amount of carbon. In many nations, they may store more carbon than what's in the forests. And India is not one of those, but nevertheless, it's a huge carbon pool in India. This is one of the studies that I forgot I put in this slide deck, so I'm trying to remember. Yeah, this is a, right, I think this is published in Nature. So this is a, I'm gonna bungle this. This is a classification of marine ecosystems into salt marshes, mangroves, or both that was done globally. And if I recall right, there's a tidal variation analysis that is part of this. So I'm gonna have to file that one and get back to you on it, but suffice it to say, it's a pretty cool large-scale wetland analysis. Planet is now, as a company, moving into the domain of saying, great, we have a scientific demonstration, we have a proof of concept over here. Can we rigorously turn that into a product layer, an information layer about the Earth that could be delivered to an end user like a government so they can make decisions based on it, even if the government does not necessarily have the upstream data information that went into creating it. And this is really a scientific problem, but now it's one of these scientific problems at large scale. And unfortunately, you can try to make information layers like this, like soil water content, land surface temperature, density maps for roads and buildings. And for those of you that have done any spatial modeling in remote sensing, what inevitably happens is that they're going to perform well in certain areas and less well in other areas. So as we're building out these products, we call them planetary variables, but that's a gentle turn of phrase on what is fundamentally spatial modeling with remote sensing data. We're looking for partners to interrogate these layers and tell us, you know, where we've gone wrong, where we've made mistakes and have inaccuracies that could be collected. It was really cool to see the work that is being done with GNSS on soil water in New Zealand right now, flying around New Zealand, because potentially that data set is going to be much stronger than our data for certain regions. And there may be regions covered by our soil water content product information that's not been collected by that mission yet. One of these that we're very excited about and we're looking forward to working with the scientific community on is a planetary variable, an information layer for above ground forest carbon. As I spent my entire postdoc on this, and that was more than 10 years ago, I'm sort of delighted that Planet has stepped into this area. What we are intending to do is very quickly, this fall, we'll have a 30-meter resolution forest carbon layer updated every quarter, every 3 months. And then into next year, a sharper version of that, ultimately up to Planet's 3.7-meter resolution. And our intent is that these layers are accurate enough that they can transact with the global economy when it comes to carbon management. So a government, a company would be able to acquire this information and use it to monitor carbon in their borders or otherwise in some holdings that they might have. Okay, we've gone all that way. We haven't necessarily helped any human beings yet or communities, but I want to show you some last examples, and then I'd be excited to talk to you for a little bit longer for questions, where we're starting to see now people generating scientific results that I think really have the potential to have a positive impact. This is, again, the Copenhagen lab, the same group that was working in India. But here they've done something but analyze a regulatory policy or a governance policy in China. China's been doing some aggressive tree planting in urban environments. So they use the same method as in India to assess 10 years of forest change in China. And they found that China's policies are having an effect, in fact, a positive one. On average, these cities are getting greener. They're increasing in their forest cover. But that they're biased, that there are certain large cities where the tree planting is extremely effective and other places where the trees are actually declining really dramatically. We are partnered with NASA Harvest, which is an organization that kind of spun out of NASA and is a hybrid organization. It's a bit of a commercial organization, a bit of a scientific organization. And they are using Planet data to do agricultural assessments for Ukraine right now in products that are being delivered to the Ukrainian government and also to other partners in the Ukrainian effort. I haven't been working on this project personally. This is being run by other people at Planet, at least our portion of it. But again, the lead is NASA Harvest itself. Here's a remarkable observation. This gray line is drawn by humans. It's just a line digitally, but that line reflects the front line of the war at the time that this imagery was put together about 6 months ago. And what you see in the satellite imagery is, and that's Planet imagery there, is there's this huge belt of unharvested agricultural fields. And this is because the war is so intense in that region that it is impractical or obviously dangerous to attempt to harvest those fields. So here, I think we're starting to see that whole picture from the measurement to the can we tell the crop species apart, the scientific question, the satellite imagery, to can we run it at scale? Can we run it over the whole of Ukraine? And then to can we deliver to the right people in Ukraine who can use this information in a useful way? There's another one on wildfire in California, and same story now, like input data from Planet, but also Sentinel, Landsat, all kinds of other data sources, VIIRS, I think, wind speed data, fuel loads information from sources inside California, all, first of all, assessing the science, can you use those input data sets to make an estimate about the forest structure or the carbon stock at a particular pixel, the fuel load at that particular pixel? Can you run it for the whole state of California? Can you run it for the whole state of California in real time or on a daily basis or a weekly basis? And then finally, can it be deployed? And it was in this case as a public website so that California agencies could use it for fire management, which they're doing. Last one of these, I think, is the Allen Coral Atlas, a project that Planet has been working on for a number of years with the University of Queensland, Arizona State University, and other partners. Our work on this has sort of come to an end. Well, not an end, we're still collaborators, but our portion of contributing data to the project has reached a kind of natural end. And this tool, which is live, is the highest resolution map of the world's coral reefs. It's global, and it has a series of these information layers, like we were talking about with carbon or with soil water content, including estimates of bathymetry at all the reefs across the Earth, estimates of bathymetric classification, like what is on the reef at that particular location. So we've kind of done this tour now, and I want to wrap this up, try to land this plane before I collect too much GNS data in the air. We have this huge increasing amount of measurement information, data that we've never had. It's increasing non-linearly, exponentially. We talked about the Earth observation satellites, but just satellites in general. I mean, there's a real prospect of a 10x, 100x, 1000x increase in Earth observation spacecraft or other types of platforms in the very near future, like in our lifetime easily. Then we have these labs like this one and universities like University of Canterbury, where people are looking at that data, not just in universities, in ivory towers, but in communities. Can you determine how many salt marshes are at this particular stretch of coastline? I would be able to tell you that if I had read that paper on time, like I promised. But you can start imagining the millions of master's students, PhD students, postdocs, community leaders that are looking at how to ask questions of this measurement input data. Then you run something at scale. And here is probably the hardest part. You then need to work collaboratively with local governments, with communities, with decision makers, many of whom without scientific backgrounds, in order to make sure that those results are having a positive impact on the world. I think I'm going to, in the interest of time, stop there. And I want to thank you again. And I'll be delighted to answer some questions. I do have to shuffle off to Christchurch Airport at about 4 o'clock, sadly. I wish I was able to be here longer, but I thank you again. Thank you for hosting us and look forward to chatting.
Thanks, Joe. As you mentioned, he'll be here until 4, but as part of this seminar session, we have about 8 minutes, thank you, for questions, and then we'll sort of shut down the Zoom call and so on, and invite further discussion for those who can stay on. So great talk, really interesting, loads of applications, which is really great to see. Any questions? It's always a brave person going first. Yes, Michelle, of course.
Thanks, Joe. That was awesome. Just out of curiosity, all of the trees that that the team annotated, do you guys hang on to that data and then use it? Okay.
So Copenhagen has that data in that case,
Okay.
the annotations. We are, in the case of our forest carbon product, for example, we are ingesting public, openly available airborne LiDAR data sets from around the world, the same data sets being used by, say, the JEDI imaging team with NASA. In a lot of cases, our partnerships include some kind of ground data, and we work with those organizations that might be collecting it for whatever protection mechanisms they need to have for that data. An interesting example from the US is that Jenga tower, the whole data fusion thing I was talking about. We built one of those algorithms. I mean, frankly, we hired a scientist who was already building one of those algorithms, and we began to invest in the development of this algorithm. And we needed to be able to prove that it worked. And proving that it worked compared to other satellite imagery was just not compelling enough. So we partnered with a startup company in the US called Arable. It's an agriculture company that produces these sensors. There might be some deployments of their sensors here, but they measure, they're kind of like a mini spectrometer and have a little bit of an infrared gas analyzer type thing in them. So people can put them in a field and like get a data stream of what the reflectance of the vegetation is underneath this sensor. So we partnered with them to get, say, 1,000 time series from those types of instruments, and we were able to validate that data. So I would say that we don't typically need, to take a whole bunch of ground data from a bunch of studies, but the more we can contribute to building a collaborative space where people can participate with that data, that'd be great.
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much. When you're talking about following an individual tree, like at a pixel level through a year,
Yeah.
are your images georeferenced? How can you be sure it's the same pixel, same tree that you're following?
There's a danger that I could spend the rest of our time on this question. It's so good. Our images are georeferenced, but they don't start out georeferenced, right? So I have to tell you this really cool story. We used to have this thing at Planet called Rectify Pro. It was a internal software that somebody had gamified and they'd made during kind of a hackathon. But in 2014 and 2015, we did not have autonomous orthorectification in our pipeline. So images were collected in space. They came back to Earth. They got basically put into a purgatory, like a staging area. And a human being had to go look at a strip of 1,000 images, take one of those images, match it up with their eye on Earth Engine or Google Earth or something to its correct position. You didn't have to be perfectly right. You just had to sort of say, okay, wait a minute. This whole strip of satellite images is not 1,000 kilometers over here. It's actually, one of them is right here. And it was such a fun feeling. It was like a video game for science where you could like take the image, click it, and then press submit. And the code would then look really closely in that area and say, can I find the right ground control points? If I do, yes, great, kick off a job, orthorectify that one image, and then copy that job 1,000 times and move all those other images in a corresponding pattern. It was super fun. I used to do it every morning for 30 minutes. Now this is entirely automated. We still have rectification failures if, for example, an image is totally cloudy. It's also hard to rectify an image that is almost entirely water. Like if it's an image of a very isolated island, you might be able to see the island and match it up, but you actually don't have enough tie points to kind of, so if we think back to the Jenga situation for a minute, all of these things I'm saying, it's sort of not a question of can you identify that one tree? Probably with enough effort, you always can, as long as the tree is visible in the data. The question is, will the algorithms at scale stack up the images properly with not enough, with not too much side-to-side error, such that you can analyze the change of the tree over time? And that part, that long version of the question, I don't think we know the answer to that yet. We have to figure that out. So far, this early work suggests that at least it's possible when you put in some kind of elbow grease on the data. But they're working in very small sites where they have, whales come on. That'll be on the recording. Quite a small place.
There's a question online. Thank you, Joe. Great presentation here at Environment Canterbury, which is a regional council here. We use Planet for enforcement and monitoring our braided rivers. Do you have any example of Planet being used for enforcement purposes?
Yes. I'm trying to think about a slide I can put on the screen immediately, but I do not. Yes, there's an example. Well, in our commercial customer network, there's a great example from California, which is Humboldt County, where they are engaged in an effort to find and cite illegal cannabis grow operations in California. Cannabis is now legal in California, but there are nevertheless illegal, unregulated production of cannabis in the area. So they use our data for that purpose, and that's quite a large and ongoing relationship. An example from the scientific community of one that was pretty interesting to me, being that I lived in Wisconsin for a number of years. There's a kind of fertilizer that happens in Wisconsin that you'll know if you've been to Wisconsin, and I'm sure things like this happen here and they happen in Wales, where basically a manure slurry is sprayed out of the back of a truck onto a field. And these manure applications might happen, say, a couple of times in the run up to the growing season. But there's a Wisconsin regulation that limits the weather conditions under which you can do this deployment. Because if the ground is snow covered, but it's warm, this manure will sort of immediately melt the snow, liquefy, and go straight into a river and cause eutrophication and cause all kinds of typical problems of effluent, right? So a team from Stanford of like undergraduates in a hackathon I saw them downloading imagery from Wisconsin and I was like, oh, what's going on? So I had a chat with them. And then a couple weeks later, this paper appeared. They had found all these sites in Wisconsin where this manure application happened. And they found numerous examples of people doing a manure application in by their read of the legislation in violation of the code. I don't know that any action was taken in that case, but it was a great example of one where that would be a hard thing to monitor without satellite imagery, frankly. I couldn't even think of a drone approach to monitoring that. And you certainly couldn't do it by driving around and looking at these people's properties as you're talking about the entire state. So last one, and I know I talked so long on Wisconsin because I love Wisconsin. So much good cheese. There's a great study of illegal fishing with our data. I'll send this one to you so you can send it to people, led by a guy named Jae-yoon Park, who was at university, but also at Global Fishing Watch. They did a large-scale survey of ships in the South China Sea and in the waters around North Korea. And they combined planet imagery with machine learning ship detections, with AIS signal data, with tasking. They pointed the SkySats at some of these events where they found what's called, what is it called? It's when you lash the ships up at sea and you're exchanging basically fish for crew. And this is often associated with slave labor in the high seas of Asia or any part of the world. So they put a whole battery of analyses around this one problem, and they did it in a pretty large region. And the paper basically concluded that they had evidence of China violating UN sanctions by fishing in North Korean waters. And it was published in Science Advances and made some news. I don't know that, violation of fishing sanctions is well outside of my area of expertise.
Thank you, Joe. We're over time. No. So, well, we'll have to call it, but you're going to be around until 4. So, please, if you're able to hang on, then we can have some more discussion.
Can I say one thing on the way out?
Yeah, of course.
So Michelle LaRue and I have been friends for a number of years, and she was grateful enough to treat me to coffee this morning. And we were talking about this talk, and we were talking about how when you travel, you're not sure if your jokes are going to land either because of your jet lag or what have you, and how awkward it is that when you make a joke, like mentioning the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the joke is followed by total silence, that silence is excruciatingly awkward. And so I just want to thank Michelle for continuing to teach me. I feel it. I don't know. I was looking at you because it happened just like we predicted over coffee.
Always a challenge. But thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you here and host you today, and know you're going all over the country doing similar with other universities. But we're fortunate that the team from Planet visited UC today, and glad that so many people managed to make it. I hope you can stay on.
Thanks again. Tristan and I you've all been gracious hosts to both of us today, especially on short notice. And you moved the seminar time slot, which I didn't realize. So thank you so much. It really was, we're very appreciative of your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Yep, that's all good. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we'll do that.